where are these Barrow-Downs located? And also, we mentioned earlier that they're burial grounds, but like to whom? The area was in between. It was east of the Old Forest, in between the Shire and Bree. So it was basically a place like we described, low hills, little small ups and downs, and absolutely no trees. And atop these little hills were burial mounds that were placed there by some of the earliest humans in the First Age. Who was initially buried there is a bit of a forgotten mystery, but that wasn't the only, well, it was the only use that they were for, but they had been used again later in the Second Age. So there's a little history of these burial grounds. So at the end of the Second Age and the beginning of the Third Age, Elendil, who we all know,
And love.
Elendil and his kin founded the kingdom of Arnor, and in its borders were the Barrow-Downs. As the Barrow-Downs were built by the Arnorian ancestors, the Arnorians themselves started a tradition of burying their own lords and kings there too. Oh, by the way, it's probably worth mentioning at this point that the Barrows weren't scary or ghoulish in any way. They were just like regular burial grounds. So we'll get into why they became
Did they have
such
any
a
wheels?
wheelbarrows.
Yeah.
Were you just trying to think of trying to shoehorn a wheelbarrow joke in there? Getting back to it, Arnor becomes split. So the kingdom of Arnor eventually becomes split into three kingdoms, and these kingdoms are called Arthedain, Rudar, and Cardolan. Cardolan is exactly where the Barrows were. So that's like the southern region of all these kingdoms.
Right.
About 600 years later, the Witch King invades Cardolan and defeats the men there. So this is about 50 years into the Angmar Wars, which is probably a topic that we'll look into in a future episode.
And it's important for this one as well.
It's a very important one. But basically, to summarize the Angmar Wars, it was between the northern Dunedain kingdoms of Arnor, mainly Arthedain, and the forces of Angmar led by the Witch King. So Angmar is like an evil kingdom. Now, back to Cardolan. Cardolan was defeated by the Witch King, but the survivors still lived there for a couple of hundred years or so. But after this came the Great Plague. COVID-19 swept through the lands of the northern kingdoms, killing many. And it's actually unknown if the Witch King had a part to play in this plague. A lot of people believe that Sauron was actually behind the plague itself. But anyways, if he was or he wasn't, the Witch King did capitalize by sending spirits to the Barrowlands to prevent that land being used as a refuge. Because the Barrows were like really, like this area was actually very, very fertile. It was good for farming, but yeah, that's where people would regroup if they could. So this was the reason that the Witch King sent all these evil spirits. Those spirits are known as the Wights. And contrary to some people's belief, the Wights are nothing to do with the kings and lords that died many years before and were buried there, but they're actually evil spirits that reside in their graves. And for some reason, these spirits were intertwined with the land, almost like parasites are to
their host.
Exactly. And yeah, so they just kind of remained in this area, and they were just kind of forgotten about, I suppose, by the Witch King. When they weren't needed anymore, they just kind of stayed to the land and like dwelt there.
So they're kind of like, it's like a poltergeist that kind of has to kind of stay in a location, like in the house or something, or
it's kind of like I think they were initially posted there to like stop anyone going there, and then it just kind of became their home, and they wouldn't leave, and you know they don't have any thoughts really to themselves. They just kind of dwindled in these lands,
and they were just like playing dress up with the old dead kings, like jewels and robes and stuff.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's described as they basically reanimate the bones. Well, like, what exactly are these Wights, Johnny? Who, like, what are these evil spirits? Where do they come from?
Just like some spirits that were summoned by the Witch King, and
yes, but like, were they summoned from? Can you summon them out your arse, or do you have to summon them from somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a good point. I suppose the spirit is probably something that has to have an origin, and maybe they were originally evil men. Maybe they were these you said that they weren't related to these like old kings of men, so we shouldn't think of it that way. So that's what I would have thought that they were, because I kind of always sort of lumped them in with their backstory being similar to the Nazgul and be like, oh, they're probably just old, you know, important kings of men who the Witch King, like basically what Sauron did to the Nazgul, then the Witch King was like, I'm going to do my own little experimentation and see what's going on here.
Yeah, pretty much. Like that is the important thing to remember, that there is a separation. Like these were bones and dead kings from Cardolan long time ago, and even before that there was like older bones from the First Age. But it was actually the Witch King and Angmar sending down evil spirits from there to reanimate these bones, and they basically just like took these lovely bones of like lovely kings and lords, and like they had all their jewelry on, they just like haunted these Barrow-Downs.